Aloha and welcome to Inside the Writer's Studio. I'm your host, Isla Allgood, and I'm excited today to bring to you from Illinois, Donald J. Bingle. He'll be reading something that he's written, and then we'll follow that up with some talk story, get to know him as a writer. Welcome, Donald.
I am Don Bingle, and I'm the author of 6 books and about 60 published short stories. I'm going to be reading from one of the books today, which I co-wrote with Jean Raby. It's called The Love-Hate Case Files. It's a paranormal fantasy, horror, romance in a legal setting, which is kind of complicated. And I'm going to be reading the preamble from that to tell you a little bit about the setting. And then, since Jean and I are currently working on the sequel, I'm going to read the opening scene from Love-Hate 2, More Love, More Hate, More Case Files, so you can see what all that's about. So here we go, the Love-Hate Case Files, preamble. No one knows when and how the magic was reborn. Maybe it never went away. After all, some people have always seen, experienced, and sometimes feared the supernatural. From pixies and fairies to werewolves, ghosts, and the walking dead. But one day, more likely one night, everyone else began to see, experience, and sometimes too often fear the supernatural too. Maybe the quantum strings of the universe played a new musical, magical note. Maybe a blockage holding back mystical energy broke, and a trickle of magic became a torrent of paranormal power. Maybe the stars aligned, and a new age dawned, like the hippies of Haight-Ashbury always promised it would. The world has changed. Some people embrace the change. Some fear it. There are those who simply try to ignore it, while others fight against it. But facts are facts. Other than humans, OTs, walk the earth with man and animal. They enjoy life, half-life, or unlife, as the case may be, as best they can. Some work, some laugh and love, handfuls skulk through alleys in the night, others fade from sight. Some eat, drink, and make mayhem, sometimes with food and drink best not described in polite company. And there are those who kill and terrorize. The unlucky among them are hunted down and captured. Some fight back. Some are arrested. Some need lawyers, savvy souls to look after their legal and supernatural rights. Thomas Brock and Evelyn Love are looking for such clients. The opening case from Love-Hate 2, Sunday, late evening. The co-ed screamed again as she turned back to look at him, her eyes wide, her blonde hair tangling as she raced pell-mell down the street without looking where she was going. News K. Tong reached out a decaying arm, one skeletal finger completely denuded of rotted flesh, a flash of white against the gray, green, and black of the rest of his shambling torso. Grrr, he sneered, stretching toward her. Arrgh! She screamed louder and longer, causing her boyfriend, a step ahead, to look back just as she tripped on the edge of a pothole and lurched forward. Luckily for her, and Kate Tong, her boyfriend reached out and caught her elbow, steadying her from falling. Grrr, Kate Tong menaced again as he took a moment to glance around him to see other teens and young couples chased by his fellow zombies. A few humans were bolting forward, ahead of the ravenous pack, but many, many more were being overcome and surrounded by the rest of his zombie crew. He turned his attention back to his personal prey. Come on, the boyfriend yelled, his voice cracking into a higher octave. Just 3 more blocks and we're safe. The blonde exhaled a deep breath and sucked in a new one. I don't know if I can make it, baby. Kate Tong slackened his pace. High-speed shambling takes a lot of stamina when your muscles are literally rotting off your bones. He watched the boyfriend pull at her arm, trying to get her to run faster. You have to, Darla. Just a few more blocks. We have to live. Darla shook her head, her long, sweat-soaked locks twirling like a dirty mop. Only one of us needs to live. We can still win if only one of us survives. That did it. Kate Tong increased his speed from moderate shamble to full press, stumbling, lunging forward, arms outstretched. Now they both had to die. He might be a zombie, but that didn't mean he didn't have a personal code. No one who broke character could live, could win. He had just tagged the blonde on her shoulder with the cold, decaying flesh of his hand when a beam of intense white light assaulted him. His head snapped back. His decaying arms jerked up in a vain attempt to shield his cloudy eyes. Darla slipped her way, her boyfriend whooping with glee as they rushed ahead. This wasn't right. This wasn't the way it was supposed to go. This wasn't part of the proffered zombie walk tourist experience. K. Tong slitted his eyes and peeked out from beneath the tattered sleeve of his rotting sports coat. A group of burly-looking men were stepping out from behind the lights on the opposite side of the street. One used some handheld gizmo to zap the zombie closest to the lights. K. Tong thought the zapped undead was Manny Ortoon, one of his squad leaders. Manny twitched and slumped forward as the device was shut off. Two of the humans caught him before he fell, cuffed him, then looped a nylon rope around his neck. Using the rope and another brief zap from what K. Tong guessed were cattle prods, they started marching Manny back toward the lights. Other shadowy men moved toward the rest of his fellow zombies, obviously on the same mission. K. Tong jerked his head right and saw a narrow space between two buildings. He crouched and moved into the darkness it provided, then sidestepped his way deep into its shadowy protection. There was nothing he could do but watch in terror as his crew was herded up like livestock, loaded into cattle trucks, and hauled off to who knows where. Prison? A concentration camp? A private hunting club? K. Tong had no clue, but he knew someone who could find out, someone who cared about the rights of zombies and the entire spectrum of OTs who now populated a magic-filled San Francisco, someone who looked out for the creatures of the night. He reached into the inner pocket of his decaying sports coat and pulled out a card. It simply read, Law Offices of Thomas Brock.
Well, thank you, Don. That was quite the experience, the zombie experience, and I really appreciate your enthusiasm in your reading. Well, it makes it so much more. I mean, you're animated with your reading. It makes it interesting for the viewer, you know.
Well, you know, I was a thespian in high school, and for many, many years back toward the end of the last century, I was a tournament role-playing gamer. In fact, I was the world's top-ranked player of classic role-playing tournaments for about 15 years.
Wow.
A while back. So I'm very used to doing voices and accents and kind of extemporaneous conversation.
It's a nice combination, and I have a son who's an actor and played zombies, so I was right there with you. There is a fascinating.
So you know what zombie walks are?
What?
You know what zombie walks are then? Where people, they actually have zombie walks, especially in big towns, where people dress up as zombies and they pretend to chase people down the street and capture them.
Yeah, he did that during.
So, you know, when
he did that at one of his shows where all the actors came out and they were like doing that outside the theater. But I can't imagine it happening, you know, downtown Honolulu where he lived. That would be crazy.
They do it in connection with big sci-fi conventions,
Okay.
Gen Con and Comic-Con and things like that.
All right. Well, I don't think anything like that's happening right now, but we can look forward to it someday. So tell people, where are the ideas from this particular series coming from?
You know, this was kind of an oddball generation here. My co-author, Gene Raby, had a friend who was quite successful at putting out novellas that were Westerns. And, you know, he wrote a lot of things, but his steadiest income was from this series of novellas. And so Gene's like, we need to do a series of novellas because that's where the real money is. So she came up with the base characters for this, and she wrote the first case file. It's about a 25,000 word novella introducing us to Evelyn Love and Thomas Brock. And while she was working on the second one, she's just like, I can't write one of these every month. I need co-writers, so can you come in? And I wrote one, and we originally posted them as novellas, and they were entirely unsuccessful. Nobody was looking for novellas at that point in time. The Western crowd that was so fond of our friends' novellas did not translate over to urban fantasy at all.
Yeah.
And so after they'd been out for a while, she said, you know what, we need to put these out as a novel. So we pulled the ones we had out off of Amazon as novellas. And we put 4 of them together in a novel, and I wrote a kind of through line to connect them more closely together, so that there was a point to reading them all instead of just stopping after 1 or 2 case files. And we put that out, and Kevin J. Anderson's publishing house, Wordfire Press, picked that up, and it's been out for a couple of years. And there are some people who would like to see a sequel, so we are working on sequels, and we're kind of doing it in the same fashion as we did the novellas. I wrote the first one, she's writing the second one, she just finished the second one now. And then I'll write another one. The timing works out. Gina's very prolific, and I was also finishing up a sequel to my spy thriller series. So I finished my love-hate case file and then started working on that sequel while she was working on the next part of the book. And now that I'm about through with the first draft of that and need to set it aside for a little time to, get some distance from it before polishing it up for beta readers, it's a good time for me to jump back in and write something short. So kind of a long answer.
Yeah, you brought up a couple of things. First of all, co-writing. That's not something, I have done it once with 2 other writers and on a script. And I wondered, you said a little bit about how she developed she came up with the characters and then wrote one case file, and then you obviously kept those characters, wrote another case file. And how is that? Like what's the pros and cons of that experience?
It's fine. I'm a little bit used to it for 2 reasons. One, when I was playing role-playing games, I also wrote role-playing game scenarios for tournament play. And so I had some co-authors there. And very often it would be a trade-off scenes, or one person would write the characters and the other one would write the adventure. I'd also have done some tie-in writing. I've done tie-in writing for game worlds like Dragonlance and Forgotten Realms.
What is that, Don? What is a tie-in writing?
Tie-in writing is where you write stories or books that are based on some other property. It could be a media property like Murder, She Wrote, or James Bond, or in my case, I've not only written for Dragonlance and Forgotten Realms, which are game worlds for Dungeons and Dragons, but I wrote long before the live-action movies started. I wrote tie-in fiction for BattleTech, and I'm going to forget the names now, but some of the other kind of fighting robot creature things.
Okay.
So, and when you do that, you have to learn about the world that you're writing in. You have to abide by certain rules, and so because you're playing in somebody else's playground.
Yeah.
And so you get used to doing things that will work for them, and obey their rules and their world setting. Mm-hmm. And so that makes it a little bit easier. I definitely, in terms of co-writing books, I prefer the kind of take turns at cases. I know people who take turns at chapters, I think two people writing one chapter at the same time is just a little too weird for me. It's not that Gene and I don't comment on each other's stuff. And since
Yeah.
I'm a lawyer by trade and Gene isn't, there are legal things that, I'll provide to her to put into her scenes
Mm-hmm.
or tell her that aren't realistic, even though they're courtroom scenes and I was never a litigator. So we do comment and add to each other's stuff, but somebody has to be in charge. I think
Yeah.
if nobody's in charge of a particular scene, it just you don't have clear direction.
Do you find that when you did that and you had other people read your book, did you get feedback that they could hear your different voices, or did it, was it kind of blended?
Well, sometimes, the thing about the case files is that the cases are markedly different. One will be about zombies, another will be about werewolves or whatever. And I had one friend who was kind of like, oh, I like, I really liked the book. I didn't like this case file so much, and it didn't do anything for me. Of course, it was one of the ones I wrote. So I didn't tell him that. There's no reason to make him feel awkward.
No, that's your thing.
Yeah. So yeah, certainly you have to worry about that kind of thing. But again, going back to playing role-playing games, one of the things about playing tournament role-playing games was that you were given a character that had a personality and an explanation of what that character thought of the other characters. So you get very much into the mindset of playing someone the way they're supposed to be played. In terms of, like an impromptu scene in theater. If you're playing the crotchety old man and there's certain things you hit. If you're playing a senile old man, you hit different notes.
Right.
If you're playing, a chicken, well, then you're doing something completely different.
Right. So you're staying in certain parameters based on the task that you're dealing with your writing. And so one of the things that I'm really hearing from you is that you've learned how to make a living out of this in a way maybe different than somebody else. Would you say that's true, or is this your side thing?
Make a living. I mean, yes, I do it professionally and I try to make money at it. But it's a tough row to hoe to make money as a writer, even with bunches of books and short stories. I mean, short stories, the per word rate really hasn't gone up since the 30s. And so there's not a lot of money in short stories for sure.
Yeah.
And in books, you can hit it big and you can make a lot of money, and then people can want to make movies out of your stuff, and you can be like J.K. Rowling and all that kind of stuff. But short of that, it's a constant effort to put out material and market it and, actually make some money at it. I used to work as legal counsel for a food service company, and one of the things they always said was, it's easy to give food away. It's hard to make money selling food. And the same is true for books.
Yeah.
There are so many people who are giving so much away.
Yeah.
Some of it's terrible, some of it's good, but if you give it all away, there's no way that anybody can make a living in the business except for the outliers.
Yeah, yeah. Have you been writing a long time, Don?
I kind of got into it in a more serious way around in the 90s. When I was gaming, I was writing gaming product, and so I wrote product for some of the game companies as well as the tournament scenarios. And actually, the gaming companies paid pretty well. And some of the editors that I met there were connected with some other publishers. And so I kind of accidentally fell into a situation where I was kind of the backup guy for themed anthologies that DAW put out. DAW is a sci-fi and fantasy publisher. And they would often have themed anthologies. So this anthology is about imaginary friends, and this anthology is about rural monsters, and this one's about time travel or blah blah blah. And they'd have these themes, and they'd get people who were more famous than me, which is pretty much everybody, and contract them to write stories, and they were all due at a certain time, and then the packager would put them together and send them off to Daw, and Daw would do an edit, and sure enough, a year later or so, the book would come out. And every once in a while, the editors would get in a bind because somebody who was supposed to write a story didn't turn it in, or they told them that they could write somewhere from 3,000 to 6,000 words long, and everybody wrote something that was 3,000 or 3,500 words long. And suddenly now the book's only about 60% as long as it's supposed to be. And so I would get these calls from these editors once they found out that I could do this. And it's like, we need a story about a sentient animal, and it can't be a gerbil or a wolf, and we need it as soon as you can get it to us. And it has to be 4,000 words long to 4,800 words long or whatever. And I got very much in the groove to doing that. I think my quickest turnaround was actually on the sentient animal one, where I got a call. I sat down and came up with 3 ideas. I picked the idea I liked, but you almost never want to go with your first idea. And picked the idea I liked. There was a little bit of research I needed to do. I couldn't find the book. I woke up my wife. She found the book for me. She went back to sleep. I did my little bit of research. I wrote the story. I then set it down and went and watched TV for an hour to get some distance, an attempt to get some distance from the story before I did a polish. Reread the story, polished it up, sent it off as a 4,000 plus word story, 7 hours from when the call came in to when I sent the story out. Usually they give me.
Yeah, I think that's a great point about having a point of focus. And how I know sometimes I want to write what I want to write, and sometimes when I get a prompt like that or a direction, it helps me. It helps me focus, and ideas come for that particular writing. And it sounds like that's worked pretty well for you too.
And it's meant that I've written all sorts of things that I never would have written otherwise.
Yeah.
When I got the call for tie-in fiction for BattleTech, one of the editors called me or emailed me actually, and he said, you might get an email from this guy, so don't think it's spam. Because I told him you could write fight scenes really fast, and he has a project. And so it's like, fine, whatever. And the next day I get this email. I'm at my law office at the time, and it's kind of like, congratulations, you've been asked to write, in one of the, 3 universes of these fighting robots. And it's kind of like, there are 3, it was Transformers. I forgot the name earlier, but it's Transformers before the live action movies. He's like, you can set your story about Transformers in any of the 3 Transformers universes. And I'm like, I was practicing law when Transformers came out. I never played with them as a kid.
Yeah.
And so it's like, there are 3 universes. I better do my research. So I go to the local Barnes and Noble, and I go to the kids section. Now, when you look like me and you go to the kids section of a Barnes and Noble and start kind of wandering around, you get attention from the staff real quick.
Yeah.
And they're like, "What can we do for you, sir?" And it's like, I need some stuff on Transformers. And I thought, well, here's a Transformers novel. And he says, but we also have this. And he walks me over to the coffee table book section of the store. It's like, here's this giant $40 coffee table book that, has specifications and explanations of every Transformer, and, and explains and conforms the 3 Transformer universes. It was like, okay, I'm only getting paid $100 for this, but I'm springing for $40 for the coffee table book because it's research,
Yeah.
And I never would have written a Transformer story.
Right.
And as it turned out, one of the things about getting asked to do these anthologies, when you're especially when you're the final guy to come in, it's not like they send you the other stories. You don't know what other people have written.
Mhm.
And so it's kind of like, well, we need one more story. But you know, if you write something that is too similar in plot or theme or characters or whatever to what they've previously already accepted, your thing isn't going to be accepted. So you have to kind of play at the margins a little bit.
Mm.
So I wrote a story about a transformer who refused to transform from robot form into car form, right?
Mhm.
And he was a pacifist. It's like, look, I don't know what stories they have, but I would bet money they do not have any other stories about pacifist, non-transforming transformers. And I sent it off, and they liked it fine. And then the guy sent me a note. He's like, liked your story fine. Of course, I have to send it through to get approval from Hasbro because they own the toys. That's like, oh yeah, Hasbro's going to really love a story about a pacifist non-transforming
Yeah.
transformer, which could be read as an allegory for gay rights.
Yeah.
But either they liked it fine or they just didn't pay that much attention to it, and it got accepted. But I never would have written that.
Yeah.
I've written stories from the point of view of a chicken. I never would have written a story from a point of view of a chicken. If I hadn't needed to do that for a very specific call.
Well, I want to thank you, Don, for being here for all the way from Illinois and sharing the work that you read, and also all of your experiences, which I know is probably this much of everything. But we try to keep these relatively short so that people can enjoy somebody and get a flavor of somebody. So thank you so
And
much.
I know I do ramble on.
Oh, it's nice.
I know I do ramble on a bit.
No worries, no worries.
Okay.
Thank you very much. And I want to remind viewers that if you want to know more about the Guild, you can go to the website, HawaiiWritersGuild.com. You can go to the Facebook page, Hawaii Writers Guild. And until next time, aloha, everybody.